Senator Paterson.
Mr Acting Deputy President, I present the report of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security on its review of the relisting of Hezbollah's external security organisation as a terrorist organisation under the Criminal Code, and I seek leave to speak to the report.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President, and I thank the Senate, in particular the whips, for facilitating the committee's requirement of meeting its statutory requirement to table this report within the 15-day disallowance period. The committee's review examines the minister's decision to list this organisation. Section 102(1)(a) of the Criminal Code provides the committee may review a regulation which lists or relists an organisation as a terrorist organisation and report to both Houses of Parliament before the end of the applicable 15-day sitting disallowance period. The report I am presenting today serves this purpose and is being presented within the required period. Hezbollah's external security organisation has been listed as a terrorist organisation under the Criminal Code since 2003. Regulations that specify an organisation as a terrorist organisation cease to have effect on the 3rd anniversary of the day at which they take effect. Organisations can be relisted provided that the minister is satisfied on reasonable grounds that the organisation is directly or indirectly engaged in, preparing, planning, assisting in or fostering the doing of a terrorist act or advocates the doing of a terrorist act. Hezbollah's ESO has been relisted 6 times since 2003 and this will mark the 7th. Each time the relisting of Hezbollah's ESO has been reviewed, it has been supported by the committee, as it has been in this case. In examining the evidence that has been provided, the committee is satisfied with the listing processes and consider that they have been followed appropriately for this organisation. There is a long history of attacks around the world attributed to the ESO, including a 2012 bombing of an Israeli tourist bus in Bulgaria which killed 6 people. Last September, a dual Australian-Lebanese citizen was convicted in absentia for his role in this attack. Given this, the committee is in no doubt the government's decision to relist the ESO under Division 102 of the Criminal Code is an appropriate one and finds no reason to disallow the regulations. However, the committee was concerned by the decision to, at this stage, only relist Hezbollah's ESO. In its last review of the relisting of Hezbollah in 2018, the committee recommended that the government consider extending the listing to include the military wing of Hezbollah. In this report, the committee goes a step further. We recommend the government consider listing Hezbollah in its entirety as a terrorist organisation. We do so based on the expert evidence received by the committee that the distinction that we currently draw between Hezbollah's ESO and the rest of Hezbollah is an arbitrary one. Dr Matthew Levitt, a world-renowned expert on Hezbollah, told the committee that there is no plausible intellectual case to distinguish between the ESO and the rest of Hezbollah, who he described as a singular, unitary organisation. As he noted, it is a distinction that Hezbollah itself explicitly rejects. In his submission, Dr Levitt quoted Naeem Qassam, the Deputy Secretary of Hezbollah, saying, "Hezbollah has one single leadership, and its name is the Decision-Making Shura Council. It manages the political activity, the jihad activity, the cultural and social activities. Hezbollah's Secretary-General is the head of the Shura Council and also the head of the Jihad Council, and this means we have one leadership with one administration." Australia's position listing only the ESO as a terrorist organisation is increasingly isolated internationally. 22 countries and 2 regional organisations list them in their entirety, including our 5 allies such as the United Kingdom, the United States and Canada, like-minded countries such as Germany, Austria, Switzerland and Japan, and Arab countries and groupings including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Arab League. Other like-minded jurisdictions, such as the European Union, France and New Zealand, at least extend their listing beyond the ESO to include the military wing. The military wing has, in the past, provided training and operational support for other organisations prescribed as terrorist entities by Australia, such as the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades. Given this evidence, the question for the committee was, should Australia continue to persist with the fiction that the ESO is a discrete entity within Hezbollah? There are practical reasons why we should not. One case of concern to the committee was that of Ali Haidar, a New South Wales man convicted of violent offences who escaped being classified as a high-risk terrorist offender as sought by police because a judge said that it was not clear that his expressed support for Hezbollah was for the external security organisation or simply the political wing. As Justice Davies noted, the Commonwealth accepts that Hezbollah maintains a militia and that it has deployed forces in Syria to assist the Syrian regime. Notwithstanding, the Commonwealth did not list Hezbollah as a terrorist organisation. In my opinion, it would introduce confusion into the area of anti-terrorism if the court were to reach a different conclusion. As the Deputy Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police, Ian McCartney, told the committee, if an organisation is not listed as a terrorist entity by the federal government, it does make it more difficult for them to investigate and prosecute someone for terrorism offences because they are also required to prove beyond reasonable doubt that an organisation is a terrorist organisation. The committee does acknowledge that if its recommendation to broaden the listing of Hezbollah is accepted by government, there will be practical implications for some agencies of doing so. We do not lightly dismiss the evidence we received about these challenges, including in a classified hearing. However, based on the evidence we received in both classified and public hearings, we believe these challenges can be mitigated if carefully implemented. In particular, the committee was comforted by the statement by ASIO Director-General Mike Burgess at our public hearing that, quote, listing the entire organisation would not impact ASIO's ability to do its job. The committee was also informed by the experience of the United Kingdom in its listing process for Hezbollah. Like Australia, for many years the UK listed only the external security organisation, but in 2008 it widened its listing to include the military wing, and in 2019 it did so to all of Hezbollah. The UK Home Secretary who made that decision, Sajid Javid, said at the time, "There have long been calls to ban the whole group, with the distinction between the two factions derided as smoke and mirrors. Hezbollah itself has laughed off the suggestion that there is a difference. I have carefully considered the evidence and I am satisfied that they are one and the same, with the entire organisation being linked to terrorism. This government have continued to call on Hezbollah to end its armed status. It has not listened. Indeed, its behaviour has escalated. The distinction between its political and military wings is now untenable. It is right that we now act to prescribe this entire organisation." Crucially, in evaluating the UK's decision to do so in retrospect in 2020, Javid also said, "The relationship with Lebanon is as strong as ever. The international development program we had to recalibrate some of them, stop one or two of them and invest in others, but that work continues." Having carefully considered all of the evidence presented to it, the committee has recommended that the Australian government consider extending the listing of the ESO to the entire organisation of Hezbollah. The committee has also recommended that the Department of Home Affairs and other relevant agencies provide the committee with a classified briefing on its response to this recommendation within 3 months of the tabling of this report. This is to ensure that the 3-year listing period does not elapse before further investigating this matter. Finally, the committee would like to thank members of the community and international experts who made submissions to this inquiry and gave evidence at a public hearing. The evidence they provided was compelling and was very helpful in guiding the committee's decision in this matter. I would also like to thank my fellow members of the committee for the diligent and considered way they approached this inquiry on a tight deadline. The PJCIS is rightly recognised for its bipartisan approach to national security issues, and this inquiry is a perfect example of how powerful that can be in the service of the national interests, and I commend the report to the Senate and I seek leave to continue my remarks.